I can't believe I'm actually talking about this because it's as if like the worst fears of an entire fandom has just come true collectively in an instant, and yes, this is 100% real. I wish I was lying, that I was gaslighting you, but I'm not. This is real, so in case you don't know, Craig Mazin is the guy behind the awful Last of Us HBO TV show. It's just not very good in my opinion, and a very bad pale comparison, if you will, to the game, and that second season, by the way, was abysmal dog water of the lowest caliber, and proved in real time that Naughty Dog's direction for that second story clearly was not a fluke. They tried to gaslight us into believing that it was only the fans of the video games who were being mean to it, but no, even normal everyday people hated the story too. But what if I told you that Craig Mazin is now setting his sights on his next target after The Last of Us? And guys, it's Baldur's Gate 3. I'm not kidding. This is real, dude. Look at this from Deadline. Oh my god, look at this. Baldur's Gate TV series continuing game story in works at HBO from The Last of Us co-creator Craig Mazin and Hasbro Entertainment. Yeah, this is real. This is actually happening, dude. What are we doing? But you're probably then thinking, oh, like a new show set in the Dungeons and Dragons universe. That doesn't sound bad. On paper, sure. Yeah, a new story with new characters set in D&D but as live action, that could actually work, to be real with you. That sounds totally fine. I mean, that would be cool, but that's not what's happening here. As Deadline says here, unlike HBO's The Last of Us, which retold the story from the PlayStation games, the Baldur's Gate TV series will be a continuation to the games, telling a story that takes place immediately after the events of Baldur's Gate 3, as the characters, old and new, are dealing with the ramifications of the events in the third game. So you heard that right, guys. The Baldur's Gate TV show will be an official sequel to Baldur's Gate 3, as in the game that Larian Studios made and won Game of the Year, of course, in 2023. Holy dude, where do I even begin with why this is a really terrible idea? Well, let's start with the fact that Larian accomplished with BG3, shall we? So as you likely know, BG3 is all about player choice. There is no canon version of what really happens in BG3 due to how everything and anything can technically go down in any single playthrough. Some players likely beat the game with their whole party intact. Others maybe beat it with various members either hating them, leaving them, or dying in combat. Most people, by the way, didn't even recruit Minthara because she was technically an evil companion that required you to sacrifice an entire village just to recruit her pretty much. But like for example, right, I didn't also recruit Minthara at all during my playthrough. Because again, I was playing as a holy paladin, and paladins don't just let entire villages go up in flames, you know? Kinda goes against the whole holy knight shtick, if you will. But anyways, the point is that BG3 has no canon ending, because any sort of thing could happen at any time. I guess spoilers for BG3, somewhat, but I'm going to keep it light, so don't worry. But the short description is, you can save the world, obviously. That's one of the endings. Well, you can, I guess. But you see, this is also the problem, you see? Because I'll be vague here, don't worry, but in case you haven't beat it or anything, but there's like a big event that happens at the end. Obviously, a certain enemy emerges, right? And things get worse really, really quickly for everyone. And then obviously now, depending on how you react to this finale and your choices, you can either save the world, which is likely what Craig Mazin is going with, because that's obviously the only ending where this show could reasonably exist, or you can cause, and this is Larian Studios obviously, but you can side with the evil and, you know, take over the world too. That's another choice. Because again, this game has a lot of player choice, in case you haven't noticed. Plus, there's all the individual character quests too. Like, when you played it, did you find Shadowheart's parents or not? Did her hair turn white? Did you help Karlach with her Fireheart problem? Did you help Lae'zel deal with all the stuff that she's dealing with? Is Gale still tied to that magic thing that I don't want to spoil in case you never played it? Look, the point is that there's a lot of things that are determined by you, the player, hence the whole, you know, replayability of the game thing that's, you know, really important, obviously. You can play it as a good guy, a bad guy. Really, whatever you want can happen. This is why BG3 still has a very good size audience to this day. It truly is one of the most immersive RPGs ever, but it's also what makes a TV show about the direct events following its story. I just gotta say it how it is. That makes absolutely no sense at all, because this would mean that Craig Mazin would then have to pick canonized endings for every hero of the game, and not only that, by the way, but he would also need to pick his, I guess, main character archetype that would be now the main character canon version of Baldur's Gate 3 as well, which that is a whole other can of worms, because obviously Everyone played something different. Did you play as a human male paladin, maybe a tiefling thief, an elven archer, some kind of wizard? You know what I mean? We all played something different, and that's great. Everyone obviously romanced whoever they wanted to romance to, or maybe you romanced no one. There isn't a canon ending to any of this for a reason, because it's impossible to do that with a game like this. There's also a reason why, like some people would say, like, where was the DLC, for example, for this game? But as DLCcompare.com said here, for example, that Larian Studios actually opted to not make any DLC or expansions for Baldur's Gate 3. And the reasoning given was very simple. One, they think DLC is kind of boring and they'd rather make something new. But two, and this is obviously the main reason, it would frankly be kind of impossible. The only way a DLC would work for BG3 was if it was something meant to be played on like a fresh playthrough, like a new region that's maybe accessible only from Act 1 or 2 or something like that doesn't actually influence the ending or something. The other major reason is BG3 can't have any DLC post the endgame, obviously, because the difference is in how you or I played it would then make a sequel or expansion kind of impossible with this same crew of characters. Oh, like let's say this DLC focuses heavily on Shadowheart, right? Well, what if somebody had her die in their game or she left? So what, they can't access the DLC now? Or you maybe that quest with Lae'zel is impossible unless you romanced her before? You see what I mean? Anyway, Larian was smart enough to not do that because frankly, BG3 is stuffed enough as it is when it comes to content. You don't need any more than it already has. It's already got multiple games worth of stuff in it already. But what Greg Mazin is doing now is basically doing the exact thing that Larian Studios thought would be the worst possible outcome for a game like this. He's making, essentially, let's just call it what it is, DLC or an expansion more like, but in live action to a game that has no canon ending. It's just not something that should really exist. Now, don't get me wrong, okay? Again, a Baldur's Gate TV show could be amazing, but it would need to be its own timeline with its own unique characters. What they're doing here is instead LARPing what Larian has made and trying to twist it into something that they can now claim as their own or something. And I said this in other videos about Baldur's Gate 2. I knew it that Wizards of the Coast would not be able to move on from this set of characters. Shadowheart, Lae'zel, Karlach, Astarion, and more, they have pretty much become household names for D&D. They're pretty much like the Cloud Strifes and the Commander Shepherds of the D&D universe at this point, but key here to all of this is who made these characters, and by the way, it wasn't Wizards that made them. It was Larian Studios. They were responsible for all of these characters and the game and everything else. As Insider Gaming reported here, Larian Studios, by the way, they weren't even notified prior to the announcement that this live-action TV show would be a direct sequel to their own original creation, which tells me already how Hollywood views video games still to this day. They actually still believe that they're above everyone else. And not even games, which by the way eclipses them in revenue and engagement, are equal to them when in fact actually they're better. The Last of Us TV show had Neil Druckmann creatively involved since he obviously wrote the story. Even with Fallout, at least, they had Todd Howard to consult, which depending on who you ask was good or not. Nobody, for example, from Gearbox consulted on the Borderlands movie, and I don't need to tell you how that went for them. But Jeff Keighley also confirmed a scene here where he said this: Larian, the creators of Baldur's Gate 3, tell me they have no involvement in the series, which should be the biggest red flag imaginable. Because how are you going to make a sequel where all the people who made it what it was aren't involved with it? It's just a terrible idea. There's one guy who works at Larian who goes by Cromwell on Twitter, and he replied to Jeff Keighley and said this: except that we made it popular enough for it to be referred to as Baldur's Gate 3. And I mean, he's right. And at the bottom there, a fan asked if Larian could sue, but that's not really possible. And this is another big problem. And it's exactly why Larian is doing Divinity next. Despite them making this amazing Baldur's Gate game, they don't own the IP or the franchise. Wizards, unfortunately, has all creative control on what happens in the future with that game and that world. So they can will a live-action show into existence like this without anyone's input but really their own. The creative director and CEO of Larian did, however, as seen here, write about how he views this show being a sequel to his game. Mostly he's being positive about it because, well, he has to be movie, obviously, but he does say, as I highlighted there, that Craig Mazin, the showrunner guy, did finally reach out following this news, which is weird that he didn't do this before this. Because obviously Larian made the game. The story is what they're creating. Like, they made this, and you're now following it up. But even then, the CEO says that he thinks the endings of BG3 are leaving ripe soil to tell new stories. Of course, he conveniently skirts the fact that, again, no ending or anything is technically canon. Because everyone watching this who actually played BG3, we all had a different playthrough to some degree. For example, I romanced Lae'zel. Maybe you didn't do that. How would that even work in a TV show then if the main character isn't my paladin dating Lae'zel then? It invalidates then my entire player experience that I had with the game. And knowing Craig Mazin, he's going to probably put Bello Ramsey as his chosen hero or something in it because he just wants to keep pushing that onto us. And then make us suffer as he tries to force us to believe that Bello Ramsey was the one that saved Baldur's Gate, except, well, not really. Look, I get it though. After Game of Thrones, as in like the main series, there hasn't really quite been anything that has scratched that itch, so to speak. Sure, House of the Dragon exists, the Duncan and Egg show is good too, but very short. But we don't really have that premier fantasy series, right now. I mean, Netflix ruined The Witcher already, Amazon cooked Wheel of Time, Willow doesn't even exist on Disney Plus anymore, so a Baldur's Gate TV show, that makes complete sense to me, but again, not with these characters, since everyone's choices will be invalidated by pretty much whatever Craig Mazin decides is now canon. The way Baldur's Gate 3 worked so well was because they removed themselves largely from the other stories that were told before them. Sure, they brought back some characters from previous games, but largely speaking, what they made was theirs alone, and that's why it worked. This instead just feels like a disaster that's waiting to happen. That Cromwell guy who works at Larian, of course, was kind of crashing out on Maine during this announcement, because he too had no idea this was happening either. Like, he quite literally said, as you can see here, I'm about to crash out on Maine. Like I said, he said that, and he also further said this: I've spent the last 8 to 10 years of my life with the writers and creators of Baldur's Gate 3, and they're the most incredible storytellers and creators in the space. Only hope is that they get both the credit deserved and the characters are represented at the same level as the game. And then he goes on further to explain how he hopes the writers of the TV show have the same level of respect that Larian did for the world when they created those characters in the first place. Because it's through passion that real art gets made. We all know this, but again, I have to then bring it up, man. Look at The Last of Us TV show. The first season was mostly just a remake pretty much of the first game, but just worse, because it stripped all the nuanced smaller moments, instead keeping itself focused on the key points of the story alone. The story just went by too quickly in season 1. They even wasted an entire episode on this like bizarre gay romance thing that never existed in that way in the game itself. Season 1 was ultimately fine, but nothing amazing in my opinion. Season 2, however, was an absolute nightmare. I don't know who thought a TV iteration of Last of Us 2 was ever a good idea, but it was done so poorly, they lost over half their audience and then some. It wasn't even that though. Deadline had a conversation with people close to HBO, which did Last of Us as seen here, and they also confirmed that season 3 would be the final season for that series also, despite Craig Mazin originally stating that there was no way that they could wrap up that series in just one more season. The reasoning for why this is happening is simple. Season 2 cratered in ratings. It did horribly. They lost Pedro Pascal, of course, because, what happened to him, obviously, and Bella Ramsey couldn't carry the show. Now we're going to get one more season of her, and once that's done, I guess, Last of Us, at least for now, is done forever. This clearly wasn't the plan originally, because Craig Mazin thought that he had struck gold and could make multiple Emmy award-winning seasons of television in the future. That wasn't the case, though, so that's likely why Baldur's Gate 3 now became the next possible ore to mine for him. He likely just Googled best games of the past 10 years, saw Baldur's Gate 3 at the top, and went, yeah, sure, why not? We'll do that one too, I guess. Well, at least Craig didn't pick Elden Ring. I guess there's a win in there somewhere. Either way, though, there's the other problem. These characters are intrinsically tied to their voice actors too. Jennifer English is Shadowheart. Neil Newbon is Astarion. Deborah Wild is Lae'zel. Deborah even looks like Lae'zel, minus the, green makeup, of course. The point is that it's going to be really hard to take any actor seriously that plays these games in live action, or I should say characters, I guess, if they don't sound or have the mannerisms that the characters have in the game too. But I honestly doubt that Craig Mazin really cares. I mean, look what he did with Ellie, for example. He just saw that Game of the Year award slapped to his chest, and he went, yep, I'll do that one next, thank you very much. Again, a Baldur's Gate show, that could be amazing. But this just feels like every wrong decision is getting chosen here to, willed this into existence against its own will. It also tells me that because they specifically chose the main cast of 3 here, that they knew that they couldn't write better characters of their own to challenge that. It just reeks of creative theft in a way. Sort of like how Disney kept reusing Star Wars characters they never made to make up their inability to make new compelling characters. Even videogamer.com, as you can see here, thinks that this is all a very terrible idea. They explain in that article how the very nature of what makes D&D interesting in the first place, you know, the role-playing aspect, it puts it all at odds with what a TV show can even be about in the first place. It's a franchise about reactivity and choice and consequence. You can't exactly have that same level of immersion if the characters are just going to follow a predetermined path. Either way, I'm not going to write off the show, just, yet of course, but I would be stupid to accept this as gospel considering how bad Last of Us got treated, and since Craig Mazin is, after all, one of those kinds of showrunners that loves to push the usual modern audience stuff in whatever he makes too, I can't help but feel worried about everything else here. I think personally most video game properties should just be left alone, because the nature of TV or movies usually goes against the entire point of what these stories are trying to tell in the first place. It's likely why The Last of Us Season 1 felt stifled, because the gameplay obviously can't exist in a TV show. But that gameplay, the small moments where Ellie and Joel are talking or walking around or they fight some enemies, that sort of stuff builds the game more than just the key moments if you ask me. With BG3, it's the same way. Sure, you can have the major story beats, but it was the times returning to the camp to speak to your companions, learning who they actually were, what they thought they really fleshed out, that's what really mattered. It really made you care for these people because you took the time to get to know them. This instead, it feels like a perversion of what something can be. As the videogamer.com says here, what in the 7 hells were you thinking? And they go on about how D&D is unique, and yeah, it is. But Hollywood, let's be real, they're out of unique ideas. They won't stop till they've mined every single video game property imaginable into movie form or TV form or whatever they want to do with it. I can't wait for the inevitable tone-deaf Dark Souls movie, although honestly, a Dark Souls or Elden Ring anthology series, where every episode fleshes out different backstories in those worlds via animation, not live action, that could actually be amazing, for example. If you have an entire episode dedicated to Lord Gwyn, another to Gravelord Nito, or an entire episode on Radon or Millennia and Elden Ring and exploring their backgrounds, yeah, that could work. But this, it just goes against what Baldur's Gate 3 stood for. And the fact they consulted with literally no one who made it in the first place, that tells me exactly where they placed themselves in a story like this. They truly did believe that they would be above it all when they are anything but that. I don't want to be too much of a doomer, I get that, but the way that The Last of Us already went, I have little faith in this, I gotta be real. But if you ask me, it really does come down to this. The fear is that Hollywood doesn't actually want Baldur's Gate 3, okay? They don't actually care about its story, its characters, or even its world. All they really want from this, and what's really important to them, is the brand, the Dungeons and Dragons name. Having Baldur's Gate show up on the screen, that's what they care about. Everything else doesn't matter. They want that prestige. They want the credibility that Larian made, that they didn't, be attached to this, because it legitimizes them without them having to do any of the hard work, because all of the characters and scenarios in a sense are already written for them. And then once that happens, the adaptation stop asking what made this special in the first place, but instead it becomes what it always is. It just eventually becomes, how do we make this more marketable? How do we make this for the modern audience? Everything that Larian did for this game is going to be thrown out the window, and I hate to see that. But that's how you end up with flattened companions that aren't going to be anything close to how they were when you played the game. There's going to be that moral clarity that's going to be replacing consequence, because they can't have that because it's a TV show now. And the player-driven chaos that defines the whole series and the franchise is then going to be replaced with stuff like relatable character arcs that make no sense in a setting like this. In other words, it's going to be a Baldur's Gate TV show that looks like Baldur's Gate, but doesn't feel anything like it, or I guess have anything in common with the people that made it. That's a big problem. Now, if Larian was meaningfully involved in this, if player agency was being respected, although it really can't be, let's be real, if the story embraces the ambiguity of what came before, then maybe they could surprise us. But until that really happens, everyone is right to be cautious about this, because one little thing can cause this whole thing to come crumbling down pretty much. Because we've seen what happens when Hollywood decides that it knows better than the people who built these worlds in the first place. Look at how many failed comic book adaptations we've had, or just books in general, or anything that gets taken and turned into something else. It's always like as if like they're embarrassed of the source material. You know what I mean? I just don't see this working. I just got to be honest with him. Man, I'm so conflicted about this. I got to be real. But honestly, Baldur's Gate 3 deserves better than becoming just another rewrite that's, being picked by people because I don't know, I guess they see the Emmys attached to it that they could win, and that's all it really is to them. But what do you think about all of this? Let me know in the comments. Like always, thanks for watching. Is this a good idea or a bad one? My opinion, it's a bad one, but let me know what you think. So tell me. Have a wonderful day like always, and see you guys next time.